how big things get done. California dreamin'? Picture this: you're boarding a sleek, silver train in Los Angeles. It glides out of Union Station, leaving behind endless traffic, cutting through the Central Valley, and within just 2.5 hours, you're stepping off in downtown San Francisco. Breakfast on board, no security lines, no delays, no stress. That was the dream sold to Californians in 2008 when the state approved a bold new vision, the California High-Speed Rail Project. The price tag? $33 billion. The promise? Ready by 2020. But fast forward more than a decade and what do we see? Costs ballooning past $100 billion, delays stacked on delays, endless redesigns, and only a fraction of the line even close to completion. Critics have dubbed it the bullet train to nowhere. A dazzling vision that never became reality. Now, let's look at a different story. In the early 1990s, Denmark helped fund a massive school building program in Nepal. The goal was ambitious: 20,000 schools and classrooms, mostly in some of the poorest and most remote regions on Earth. History told us to expect disaster. Most big aid projects collapse under corruption, cost overruns, and bureaucracy. But this one didn't. The schools were finished ahead of schedule, on budget, and they transformed education across the country. When a devastating earthquake hit Nepal in 2015, many of these schools literally saved lives because they had been designed to withstand disasters. So here's the big question: why does one project, backed by billions and cutting-edge technology, collapse under its own weight, while another, far more modest, succeeds spectacularly? That's the mystery at the heart of how big things get done. Bent Flyvbjerg and Dan Gardner dig into decades of research and thousands of case studies to reveal a sobering truth. Most big projects don't just fail, they fail in predictable ways. They follow what Flyvbjerg calls the iron law of megaprojects: over budget, over time, and under-delivering on their promises, over and over and over again. And yet, scattered among the failures are rare and shining successes, the exceptions that prove the rule. This book asks, what makes the difference? Why do some projects, big or small, defy the odds and actually get done right? And more importantly, how can we apply those lessons not only to billion-dollar megaprojects, but also to our own lives, careers, and personal goals? So hit the subscribe button because that's the journey we're about to take. Chapter 1: Think Slow, Act Fast. We like to believe that with enough money, vision, and determination, we can make any big idea a reality. But the truth is sobering: most big projects don't just stumble, they fail spectacularly. Bent Flyvbjerg has spent decades compiling the world's largest database of major projects, now more than 16,000 strong. Bridges, tunnels, dams, power plants, ID systems, Olympic Games, skyscrapers, you name it. And the pattern is brutally consistent: more than 90% of projects go over budget, run late, or underdeliver. A mere 8.5% finish on time and on budget. And only 0.5%, that's 1 in 200, hit cost, schedule, and deliver the promised benefits. Think about that for a second. If airline safety worked like project delivery, 9 out of 10 flights would crash or arrive days late, and only 1 in 200 would land smoothly, on time, with everyone's luggage intact. No one would fly. And yet, with projects, we just keep building. Why? Because risk in big projects doesn't behave like a neat bell curve. It's not a gentle slope of small errors. It's what statisticians call fat-tailed. That means most projects are fine for a while, until they spiral into chaos. Consider Boston's Big Dig, a highway tunnel that tripled in cost, finishing years late, and became one of the most expensive roads ever built. Or NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. Planned at $1 billion over 12 years, it ended up at $9 billion over 19 years. These are not rounding errors. These are catastrophes. So why do projects spiral out of control? Flyvbjerg offers the image of a window of doom. The longer a project drags on, the wider that window stays open, and the more chances something has to fly in and wreck it. Political turnover, economic collapse, supply chain disruptions, even something trivial like a gust of wind can trigger disaster. Remember the container ship Ever Given blocking the Suez Canal in 2021? A freak wind pushed it sideways, and global trade froze for nearly a week. Entire projects, in every industry, face this same vulnerability. But here's the good news: there's a pattern to success too. Projects that deliver don't rush in. They follow the principle: think slow, act fast. Take the Empire State Building. At the height of the Great Depression, it went from first sketch to grand opening in just 18 months. How? By doing all the heavy lifting and planning. Before a single shovel hit the ground, architects knew the exact number of beams, rivets, and windows. Construction then moved at lightning speed, sometimes a floor a day, finishing ahead of schedule and under budget. Or consider the Hoover Dam. Built during the 1930s, it was completed 2 years early and slightly under budget, despite being one of the most complex engineering feats of its time. Success came from meticulous preparation before execution. That's the paradox. Slowing down at the start is what makes it possible to speed up later. Most failed projects think fast, act slow, rushing to break ground with little planning, then stumbling for years as problems multiply. Successful ones think slow, act fast. They pour time into design, modeling, and testing when changes are cheap, so that when it's time to build, they can move with unstoppable momentum. The lesson is clear: true speed comes from deliberate preparation. Plan patiently. Build swiftly. That's how big things actually get done. Chapter 2: The Commitment Fallacy. When we picture bold leaders launching great projects, we often imagine the rousing speech, the dramatic signature on the dotted line, the shovels in the ground. Commitment is seen as strength. Hesitation is weakness. If you believe, commit, that's the mantra. But the data, and history, show that rushing to lock yourself in early is one of the biggest traps in project management. Flyvbjerg calls this the commitment fallacy. Think of Berlin's Brandenburg Airport. Germany, famous for efficiency and precision, promised the world a modern showcase airport to rival any in Europe. Construction began in 2006, with an opening date set for 2011. Politicians rushed to commit, scope defined, budgets locked in, deadlines announced. But they locked in too soon. The design was riddled with flaws, the fire safety system didn't work, contractors were poorly coordinated, and changes piled up. Year after year, the opening was delayed. Costs exploded from $2 billion to over $8 billion. When it finally opened, nearly a decade late, it was already outdated. Why? Because leaders committed too early, to the wrong plan. They confused speed of decision with strength of execution. Contrast that with Pixar. Before a single frame of a film is animated, directors and writers spend years iterating storyboards, testing characters, and building draft after draft. Nothing is locked in until it's been tested to death. And once the story is truly ready, production moves with astonishing speed and efficiency. Pixar's commitment comes late, but when it comes, it's rock solid. This is the paradox. Early commitment feels decisive, but it often commits you to failure. Projects are complex, and the first vision is rarely the right one. Locking in scope, funding, and timelines too soon means you'll be fighting your own plan as reality unfolds. The smart strategy is to delay commitment until you've done the hard work of planning. That doesn't mean dragging your feet forever. It means giving yourself time to test, model, and explore alternatives when it's still cheap to change your mind. Imagine two hikers standing at the edge of a forest. One charges in immediately, full of confidence, only to find himself lost among twisting paths. The other takes time to study the map, check the compass, and plan a route. Which one reaches the destination faster? In projects, as in hiking, the principle is the same: don't confuse early commitment with progress. True success comes from committing late, when your plan has been tested, refined, and proven. That's when every step forward counts. Chapter 3: Think from right to left. Most projects begin with a picture in someone's head: a dazzling skyscraper, a revolutionary app, a gleaming stadium. That picture becomes the focus. What will it look like? How tall? How fast? How impressive? But here's the problem. If you don't start with the right question, why are we doing this at all? Then everything else can go wrong. Flyvbjerg calls this thinking from right to left. Instead of beginning with the shiny vision on the left side of the page, you begin with the end goal on the right, the purpose, the outcome, the definition of success. Only then do you work backward to figure out what to build, and how. History is full of projects that failed because they skipped this step. Consider the Sydney Opera House. Today, it's one of the most iconic buildings in the world. But when it was conceived in the 1950s, planners were captivated by the bold design and grand vision, not by clear goals. What was it for? A world-class opera venue? A multipurpose space? Nobody nailed down the why. Construction began anyway. Years of redesigns followed, costs ballooned from an estimated $7 million to $102 million, and the original architect quit in frustration. It eventually became a masterpiece, but only after a chaotic journey that nearly destroyed it. Now contrast that with the iPod. In 2001, Apple didn't start with the question, "What kind of device can we build?" Instead, Steve Jobs began with the end in mind. 1,000 songs in your pocket. That was the right side of the page, the purpose. Everything flowed backward from that, the design, the storage capacity, the interface. And because the why was crystal clear, Apple went from idea to launch in under a year, revolutionizing music along the way. The lesson is simple. Before you talk about what you're going to build, you must define why you're building it and what success will look like. Is it profit? Is it public benefit? Is it beauty, speed, safety, efficiency? Without those success metrics, you're designing in the dark. Imagine you're setting out on a journey. If you don't decide the destination first, every road looks appealing. But the farther you travel, the more costly it becomes to admit you're on the wrong path. Projects are no different. So, think from right to left. Begin with the end in mind. Define success, then design backward. The clarity you gain at the start will save you years of waste, billions of dollars, and, more importantly, the heartbreak of building something that no one truly needed. Chapter 4: Pixar Planning. When you sit in a movie theater and watch a Pixar film, everything feels effortless. The characters are vivid, the story flows, the world feels alive. But what most people don't realize is that those 90 minutes of magic are the product of years of trial and error. At Pixar, directors are encouraged to fail early, fail often, and fail cheap. A film begins with rough sketches, storyboards, and simple animatics. Scenes are written, tested, scrapped, and rewritten, sometimes dozens of times. Whole storylines are thrown out. In fact, many beloved Pixar films looked nothing like their final versions in their early drafts. Toy Story went through multiple rewrites before Woody transformed from a sarcastic jerk into the lovable cowboy we know today. All of that rethinking happened while the film was still on paper. Why? Because in planning, mistakes are cheap. In production, they're crippling. The same principle drives the work of architect Frank Gehry. Known for landmarks like the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao and the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, Gehry's buildings look like they've defied gravity itself. But what makes them possible isn't spontaneous genius, it's endless iteration. Gehry's studio fills with cardboard models, dozens or even hundreds of variations, each one testing structure, space, and light. Only after exhausting the possibilities does he lock in a design. By the time steel and glass are ordered, the building exists in full detail on paper and in prototypes. This is the secret. Iteration is cheap in planning and ruinous in execution. Changing a storyboard costs a few pencils and some late nights. Changing a 3D animated scene costs millions. Changing a cardboard model takes minutes. Changing a half-built concert hall can take years and bankrupt a project. It's the age-old carpenter's wisdom, measure twice, cut once. And yet, most projects do the opposite. They cut first, thinking they'll measure later. They break ground with an untested design, confident they can fix problems on the fly. But in execution, every correction is slow, costly, and often permanent. That's how budgets explode and schedules collapse. Pixar and Gary show us a better way. Treat planning as the place to play, to test, to fail, to learn. Iterate until the plan is rock solid. Then, when it's time to build, you can move with confidence and speed. The lesson is clear: if you want to succeed fast, you must be willing to fail cheap and early. That's how masterpieces get made. Chapter 5. Are you experienced? When people dream up a big project, they often want it to be groundbreaking, something no one has ever seen before. New technology, new designs, new methods. And to make that dream real, they're tempted to bring in the bold newcomer, the fresh face, the untested genius. After all, isn't innovation about breaking the mold? This is where many projects stumble. They fall for what Flyvbjerg calls the novelty bias, the seductive belief that new automatically means better. Take the Channel Tunnel between Britain and France, often called the Channel. When construction began in the 1980s, Europe had plenty of experienced tunneling experts. But managers wanted to push the envelope. They brought in new technologies, new methods, and a team with less experience in underwater megatunneling. The result? Delays, overruns, and costs that nearly doubled the original budget. Innovation wasn't the problem, inexperience was. Now compare that with Denmark's Øresund Bridge, the sweeping link between Copenhagen and Malmö in Sweden. The project leaders insisted on seasoned professionals who had built similar bridges before. They didn't chase novelty for its own sake. They relied on proven methods and a team that knew the terrain. The result? A stunning bridge, delivered close to schedule and budget, that transformed regional travel. The lesson is clear: experience isn't about playing it safe. It's about understanding the pitfalls that novices can't see. A veteran builder knows that soil shifts in certain ways, that weather delays aren't just possible but inevitable, that suppliers sometimes fail. These aren't lessons you learn in theory. They're lessons learned the hard way, on the ground, over years. And experience doesn't mean avoiding innovation. Pixar's Ed Catmull once said that at his studio. New technology is never the star. Instead, they pair new tools with experienced teams who know how to tell stories. Innovation works best when it's built on a foundation of seasoned judgment. So if you want your project to succeed, don't be blinded by novelty bias. Don't assume the newest gadget, the most radical design, or the untested visionary will guarantee success. Bring in people with proven track records. People who have stumbled before and know where the traps lie. People who know when to push for bold ideas, and when to stick to what works. Because when billions of dollars and years of your life are on the line, you don't just need a fresh perspective. You need experience. Chapter 6. So you think your project is unique? Ask almost anyone leading a new project, and you'll hear the same thing. Our project is different. The usual rules don't apply. It's a comforting story, but it's almost always wrong. This is the myth of uniqueness, and it's one of the most dangerous illusions in project management. Think of Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. Politicians and planners insisted it was a one-of-a-kind project, tailored to Germany's special needs, unlike anything else. But in reality, it was just another airport, subject to the same risks that plagued airports all over the world. Had they compared their plans to other airports, they would have seen the pattern. Delays, fire safety failures, cost overruns. Instead, blinded by the idea of uniqueness, they dismissed those warnings. The result? An opening delayed by nearly a decade and billions in blown budgets. This is where reference class forecasting comes in, a method pioneered by Flyvbjerg himself. Instead of asking, "What do we think this project will cost or how long will it take?" you ask, "What happened with projects just like this one?" That's called taking the outside view. For example, if you're building a new subway line, don't assume your project is special. Look at the data from hundreds of other subway projects. The numbers don't lie. Most go over budget by a predictable margin, most take longer than expected, and most underdeliver ridership. With that knowledge, you can plan realistically, not optimistically. It's the same principle pilots use when planning a flight. They don't say, "Well, I feel like today we'll use less fuel." They use hard data from thousands of similar flights. Reference class forecasting applies that same discipline to every project. And here's the surprising twist. The projects that insist they're unique usually fail in familiar ways. A new stadium? Over budget, delayed, disappointing attendance. A revolutionary IT system? Late, buggy, more expensive than planned. Even space projects, think of NASA's James Webb Telescope, follow the same grim pattern of overrun and delay. On the flip side, projects that accept they're part of a larger class are far more likely to succeed. Why? Because they plan with their eyes open. They respect the numbers. They don't confuse hope with evidence. So the next time someone tells you, "This project is unlike anything else," remember, uniqueness is an illusion. The laws of risk and complexity still apply. If you want to beat the odds, don't pretend you're special. Learn from the past. Compare to your peers. Take the outside view. Because success doesn't come from thinking you're unique. It comes from understanding that you're not. Chapter 7: Can ignorance be your friend? In project management, we're told that the more detail we have, the better. Detailed budgets, detailed designs, detailed schedules. Certainty equals confidence, right? Not always. In fact, too much detail too early can be deadly. This sounds counterintuitive, but here's why. The early stages of a project are when uncertainty is highest. You don't yet know what obstacles you'll face, what the best design will be, or how external forces will shift around you. If you lock in every detail too soon, you freeze your flexibility. You're trapped by your own plan. Take Boston's Big Dig tunnel project. From the start, politicians demanded detailed blueprints and commitments. Every inch of concrete, every deadline, every budget item was nailed down before the real complexities were understood. But as construction unfolded, surprises multiplied: soil conditions, safety requirements, design flaws. Because the plan was rigid, every change triggered massive costs and cascading delays. In the end, the project ran billions over budget and years behind schedule. Now contrast that with Pixar's filmmaking process, which we discussed earlier. At the start of a film, the directors don't lock in every scene or character arc. Instead, they leave space for discovery. They storyboard, test, scrap, and rebuild. Early drafts are rough and even embarrassing, but that ignorance is useful. It leaves room to adapt and learn what actually works. Only when the story has been stress-tested do they lock in the final details. This principle applies to construction as well. The builders of the Øresund Bridge between Denmark and Sweden understood that soil, weather, and engineering surprises were inevitable. So instead of committing to rigid blueprints from day one, they planned for flexibility. Designs allowed for adjustments, contracts included contingencies, and the team adapted as reality unfolded. The result? A complex megaproject delivered smoothly. The lesson here is simple but profound: ignorance can be your friend, if you respect it. In the beginning, don't pretend you know everything. Accept that you don't. Keep your plans flexible, your designs open to revision, and your team ready to adapt. By leaving room for learning, you avoid the trap of being locked into a bad plan. So, while it feels safer to map out every detail up front, the truth is that premature precision is often an illusion. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is admit what you don't know, and design your project to learn as you go. Chapter 8: A Single, Determined Organism. Imagine a rowing team gliding across the water. Every oar dips in unison, every stroke is coordinated, the boat cuts forward in perfect rhythm. Now imagine the same boat if half the rowers pull forward while the others drag back. Chaos. The boat jerks sideways, slows down, maybe even capsizes. That's the difference alignment makes in a project. For big things to get done, the team has to act as a single, determined organism. Pixar offers a masterclass in this. At the studio, everyone, from the director to the newest animator, is encouraged to critique the work in progress. They hold what's called the brain trust meeting, where a film is torn apart and rebuilt by the collective. It's not about egos, it's about the story. Leadership sets the tone. The best idea wins, no matter where it comes from. Because of this culture, Pixar's films almost always finish strong, even if they start rough. The team rows in the same direction. Now compare that with Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, the infamous Ghost Airport. There, leadership was fractured from the start. Politicians wanted flashy features to impress voters, contractors wanted shortcuts, engineers raised concerns that were ignored, and managers fought turf wars. Instead of a unified organism, the project became a battlefield of egos. By the time the airport opened nearly a decade late, billions had been wasted, and the reputation of German efficiency had taken a huge hit. The lesson is simple: leadership matters, but it's not about charisma or iron control. It's about creating alignment. Leaders set the vision and tone, but success comes from building a culture where collaboration is real and egos take a back seat. Frank Gehry, the architect we met earlier, follows this principle in his studio. He insists that everyone involved in a project, engineers, designers, builders, has a voice in shaping the design. The result is not only stunning architecture, but also buildings that actually stand up, function, and get delivered. Projects fail when individuals pull in different directions. They succeed when the team acts as one, like that rowing crew slicing across the water. Alignment turns complexity into momentum. So if you want to get big things done, don't just chase visionaries or star leaders. Build a team that can move as a single, determined organism. Because in the end, it's not brilliance or ego that makes projects succeed. It's alignment. Chapter 9. What's your Lego? Think back to when you were a kid, sitting on the floor with a box of Lego bricks. You didn't start by imagining the entire castle in perfect detail. You started with one block. Then another. Piece by piece, the structure grew, sturdy, flexible, and ready to expand as far as your imagination could take it. That's the genius of modularity. And it's just as powerful in billion-dollar projects as it is in a child's playroom. When projects are built as one massive, unique whole, they become fragile. A single flaw in design or execution can ripple through the entire structure, causing delays, overruns, or even collapse. But when you build with modules, repeatable units, tested and improved each time, your project becomes scalable, resilient, and far less risky. Take renewable energy farms. Instead of constructing one giant, untested power plant, developers build arrays of wind turbines or solar panels. Each turbine is a Lego block. If one fails, the system keeps running. If demand grows, you just add more blocks. Costs drop as experience accumulates, and the technology steadily improves. That's why renewable projects, once seen as risky, are now some of the most reliable large-scale builds in the world. Digital platforms work the same way. Amazon didn't try to build the entire empire overnight. It started with books, one Lego block. Then came music, electronics, clothing, cloud computing. Each block was added, tested, and integrated into the larger structure. The modular approach turned a tiny online bookstore into one of the most powerful companies on Earth. Compare this with megaprojects that try to reinvent the wheel in one grand gesture. Nuclear plants, for example, are often designed as one-off marvels, each different from the last. That uniqueness makes them enormously expensive, slow, and prone to failure. By contrast, when firms like Tesla build gigafactories, they don't start from scratch. Each time, they replicate and refine modular designs, scaling up block by block. The lesson applies everywhere. For governments, modularity means safer, cheaper infrastructure. For businesses, it means scaling with less risk. For individuals, it means tackling big life goals by breaking them down into manageable steps, repeatable actions that build momentum. So ask yourself, what's your Lego? What repeatable block can you master, refine, and scale? Because the path to building big isn't a single heroic leap. It's stacking one solid block on top of another, until the structure becomes something extraordinary. Coda, 11 Heuristics for Better Project Leadership. By now, the message of this book is clear. Most big projects fail, but they don't have to. Success isn't luck, and it isn't magic. It comes from following a handful of powerful principles, what Flyvbjerg calls heuristics, simple rules of thumb drawn from decades of evidence. Here are 11 of them. 1. Think slow, act fast. Spend more time planning, less time building. 2. Take the outside view. Use reference class forecasting. Compare your project to thousands like it. 3. Commit late, not early. Delay lock-in until you've tested and refined the plan. 4. Think from right to left. Define the end goal and success metrics before you design solutions. 5. Use Lego blocks. Build modular, repeatable units instead of one-off monsters. 6. Be wary of uniqueness. Assume your project isn't special. The odds are the rules still apply. 7. Ignorance is useful, early. Stay flexible. Allow space for discovery before you fix details. 8. Hire experience. Bring in people who have built similar things before. 9. Align the team. A project succeeds when everyone rows in the same direction. 10. Plan for fat tails. Expect extreme risks. Don't rely on averages. 11. Data beats ego. Use evidence, not optimism or ambition, to guide decisions. At the heart of all these rules is one unifying principle. Think slow, act fast. The projects that succeed, whether a dam, a skyscraper, a film, or a business, are the ones that resist the temptation to rush, invest in careful preparation, and then execute with speed and precision. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is humility. The world is littered with failed megaprojects built on ego, ambition, and overconfidence. But the rare successes come from leaders who respect the data, accept uncertainty, and learn from the past. Big things can get done. They just don't get done by accident. They get done by following the evidence. Conclusion. So what have we learned? Big projects usually fail. History proves it, the data confirms it. Budgets explode, deadlines slip, promises fade. But it doesn't have to be that way. The rare successes show us the path: plan deliberately, execute swiftly, and build modularly. Think slow, act fast. Hire experience. Respect the data. Align your team. And above all, stay humble, because ego builds disasters, but evidence builds results. And here's the real beauty: these lessons don't just apply to megaprojects like airports, bridges, or space telescopes. They apply to you. Whether you're launching a business, writing a book, or renovating your home, the same principles hold true. Define your why. Plan with patience, and then act with speed. Break big goals into smaller blocks, and stack them, one by one, into something extraordinary. If you've found this audiobook summary valuable, share it with someone who's chasing a big goal of their own. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because just like the projects we've explored, building success is easier when we learn together. Remember, big things can get done. They just need to be done right.